oh, mold is in, really old homes or like dirty homes and, or like people who just don't take care of their houses or things like that. But I mean, really, we see stories about this every week almost celebrities dealing with mold. Multi-million dollar homes, brand new homes. I mean, lumber is oftentimes just like preloaded with it. I mean, there is mold, it can be anywhere, and it's just a matter of how much mold is there, what type of mold is it, and how sensitive are you to mold. So those are kind of like the variable sliders, but if you it's not it does not discriminate for
Right.
sure.
Hi, and welcome to The Balancing Point. I'm Dr. John Nieters, and I'm here to make traditional Chinese medicine, functional medicine, and integrative health simple, practical, and fun so you can restore balance, boost vitality, and enjoy a healthier life every single day. Hi there, and welcome to The Balancing Point. I'm Dr. John, and on the show today, we've got a very special guest, Dr. Diana Stafford. Dr. Stafford is a board certified physician with many years in practice. She completed her medical training at University of Virginia School of Medicine and did a residency in Washington, D.C. She's an integrative medicine physician who works with patients to achieve optimal health. One of the things that I found fascinating about her bio is she's a mold literate practitioner. Very few of those around. Dr. Diana treats mold related illnesses and other health issues related to environmental exposure. Dr. Stafford believes that analyzing the root cause of health problems, not just adding another prescription to briefly allay the symptoms, is the true path to health and wellness. Dr. Diana, I'm very, very happy to have you on here today. And I was very fascinated by the title of your that you gave me. You're not broken, you're overloaded. Why healing feels so hard. And boy, do we run into that these days, right?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Dr. John. It's great to be here.
From looking at your bio and from other things on your site, it seems like you work with a lot of people who feel like they've tried everything, but still aren't getting better. What's usually being missed in your experience?
Yeah, that's so true. So most of the time when I see clients, they have tried a lot of things. So most of the times it's not that they haven't tried enough different things. It's that the root causes or the root driving factors weren't addressed, weren't uncovered, or that things were approached in the wrong order. So a lot of times I see that toxin overload or mold exposure, gut dysfunction, dysregulated nervous system, all these factors can be coming into play. And these are things that, of course, are not addressed by conventional medical system or tested for or talked about really. Sometimes the gut dysfunction, but a lot of things, in the conventional medical system, they do them more for the quick fix, right? So with root causes that are so incredibly common, like toxin overload and gut dysbiosis, and dysregulated nervous system, a lot of times a combination of those things, if they're not addressed and with the right sequence, then you can do, sometimes people come to see me on 30 supplements or things like that, or, an intense, exercise routine, and they've tried every kind of elimination diet or things like that, that sound like a great idea. And, it's the next hot thing on social media to add to your regimen, but sometimes it's too many inputs and it's not gonna stick. If you're constantly being barraged by toxins, for example, if you have a mold exposure going on or other toxins in your indoor environment, or which can really affect every single body system, not just respiratory. Or if you're in fight or flight state and then your supplements won't be working properly or anything you're doing is not really actually going to work as it's supposed to because your nervous system is actually blocking that. All of these factors, I just love when these light bulb moments go off for people when I'm like describing what they're feeling and they're saying, yes, absolutely. I feel like that. I've tried everything. The regular medical system isn't cutting it for me. So we've got to get to the root causes and approach things without, throwing the kitchen sink at it either.
Yeah, no, As you're speaking, I'm thinking about one delightful patient. She suffers a little bit from too many cooks in the kitchen syndrome, and our initial intake, the identifiable ICD-10 coded issues filled an entire sheet, and they're accurate. She's not making it up. I mean, it's really we've got tests to prove it. And then she has an entire page of supplements she's taking, not from me, but from someone else. And it's like, boy, I don't know if you can even digest these. I mean, and again, she's not really hasn't been getting better. She's getting a little better now because we're trying to trim things back for her a bit. But it's hard for her to give up her supplements, right? She's really become wedded to them. So, yeah, so I
That's
love to hear.
so true. Yeah, I definitely hear that a lot. I was just talking with a client about that yesterday because she was to the point where she had to take things kind of like in batches, with this was from this, provider and this was from this provider. So she had like a handful here and a handful there. And as you're saying, I'm thinking, can you even digest all of this? It's just too many inputs and everything may have a hypothetical purpose, but it's not, it's too much. It's really
Yeah.
too much.
And especially if they've got gut problems, right? As either a co-problem or at the root, well, all those supplements are very difficult. Like I'm 75, and when I hit about 65, I started changing if I do take supplements from capsules to tonics, right? And I take everything as a liquid now, and I'm much better for it because I can actually absorb those. So I noticed that you do some very interesting, testing. I saw that you did do I think it was a urine test for mycotoxins, and then you do, some stool testing and oats testing. And we do all of those, but our experience it's so nice that you're an MD because my patients, for example, will take a really well done stool test, right? Really good companies to their GI doc, and the GI doc looks at it and just throws it in the waste can. It's like, I don't know what to do with this. And so
Yeah.
it's nice that you, as a medical doctor, are doing that work. So, congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, gut testing, I love toxins testing, but gut testing I love it so much. Probably my favorite test because it's so informative. And you're right. I did not learn about these kind of gut tests in med school, just your standard stool culture and of course, like the scopes, the endoscopy and colonoscopy and all of that. And, take 3 samples for a ova and parasites test. So it was so enlightening whenever I learned about gut testing because I did gut before I even did mold, but, or I helped people with mold, but now I do both. Those are like my 2 main specialties. But the gut testing, I mean, it's pages and pages on your microbiome. It's the gut inflammation because inflammation, as we know, is the root of a lot of health issues and cutting that down is so so important and the intestinal permeability and butyrate, one of my favorite supplements and favorite things to talk about, the postbiotic, which is so often low because of so many factors, but it's made by the good gut bacteria and it's just so easily low. I love using butyrate and showing people the low butyrate on those tests is really powerful to really connect that with like, okay, you need this supplement because, and fiber to feed the good gut bacteria, but just you would never know that from
Right.
regular stool tests.
30 years ago, I, was dragged to a seminar by someone that I knew, and it was on leaky gut, right? And and I didn't wanna go. And about an hour into it, I went, "Oh my god, this is crazy," right? When you couple traditional Chinese medicine with a functional medicine lab testing, it's like, wow, I was just totally blown away. So I did mostly gut things for about 10 years after that, and just loved one of the things I loved when again, I'm so old. When I started doing that, I think there were 2 companies that were really doing stool testing, and now there's a new company every few weeks, right? And the testing gets better and better and easier to understand, I think, for the patients. So that's neat.
Yeah, that's so, so interesting you say about leaky gut 30 years ago. That's amazing. That's really amazing. Yeah, I feel like leaky gut is still such a term that, it's not even, like, widely accepted, right? But it's such a good way to look at it, that increased intestinal permeability, because then when you think about the fact that that means that your food particles and everything that's going to your gut is coming into contact with the innermost layer of your gut lining, which is the immune system layer, then you can really see how the gut and the immune system are interacting. And if you have some degree of leaky gut, which is how I like to put it to people. Okay, well, your zonulin is, 300. You have a very high zonulin, which means you have significant leaky gut, and those particles are getting through, not well digested. They're interfacing with the immune system, and then things like your mast cells are going off, getting random reactions, and you can really get all sorts of symptoms. I mean, because the gut really does rule it all.
Well, yeah, and of course, 30 years ago, I tried to use intestinal permeability, but what people remembered was leaky gut, and
Yeah.
then they would mention to their doctor leaky gut, and the doctor say, "Don't ever go back and see that lunatic again."
Yeah, I know. I wish we could just make our own ICD, for
Right?
functional medicine,
Yeah.
but that's alright.
Are there any specific symptom patterns that make you think something deeper is going on, kind of in general? You get a new patient, rather than just stress, which is always an issue, and basic gut issues, which are usually an issue, but what else triggers that for you?
Absolutely, yeah, and I just took a poll of people who had been in my messages on social media, and, asked, "What's the top thing you're working on?" And people said gut health, but multi-system symptoms, right? So, you got brain fog. That's a huge one, just, like, feeling like you're in a fog all the time, can't think straight. Fatigue is a really big one, and, non-restorative sleep, sort of this wired but tired feeling, and mental health, anxiety, depression, things like that, and then gut symptoms, like you said. So, or, symptoms that flare up or seem to start whenever there was a certain environment that someone either moved into, or they started working somewhere, and then, they started with these symptoms because you can get a mold or other bacterial toxins or other toxin exposure, at home, work, school, car, like any of those things, gym, any of those places. So trying to correlate it with environment. But, if it's toxin illness, or mold illness, it's not going to be just one symptom. It's going to be multi-system symptoms.
Great. And so for you, mold has is a pretty big part of the picture then,
Yeah. Yeah. So, I feel like environmental exposures, there's still so many layers behind, why that's not addressed by regular medicine. But it's so important and really, really common, because the data shows that depending on which study you look at, there it's anywhere between 20 something percent and 80 something percent of homes or buildings in general actually have had a water damage event. And then mold can grow within 24 to 48 hours very easily. And then, okay, so why does this matter? Because mold puts off a lot of invisible toxins that are microscopic. So not only do you not see them, but also when you breathe them in, they can go across the blood brain barrier, and then they can go all around the body to every single organ system. Then what happens is inflammation and toxin overload. So your liver's backing up, because your liver, people say, okay, well, that's what we have livers for, to process out toxins, right? Liver takes care of detox, and it's fine, right? Well, it gets backed up. And a lot of these toxins, like aflatoxin, one of the most common ones, for example, they jeopardize their own detoxification because they affect the liver. So not only is it a toxin, but it's a toxin that affects the liver strongly. So then you've got liver issues, which means your liver can't process out the toxins. So then you can't get them out. So, and then again, if you have gut issues, which 70% of people estimated have gut dysbiosis or microbiome issues in the gut, So then you can't process them that out that way either. You just got toxins, inflammation that can actually last long after you have left any mold exposure. So you can actually get chronic illness from it. And, we did have a personal family mold experience, mold illness about 10 years ago, which is how I initially learned about this, which pretty much blew my mind when I learned about it because, I had learned in med school that mold caused allergies, which it does, but I had not learned anything about mold toxicity or anything about, biotoxin illness. So, learning that, I decided that I wanted to help other people with it. And, as an MD, it's definitely, it's been great to be able to use kind of that general medical knowledge and apply it to then these environmental illnesses.
So I have a love-hate relationship with Chat GPT. I find it useful sometimes. It's like, oh, there's a quick summary. In fact, I did a summary of a book that I wanted to talk about. But then, of course, we have so many people that try to do their own detoxes based on, influencers online, or they plug something into AI. And boy, I've seen some disasters with that.
Yeah, I have too, especially because I mean, and my husband works in AI, so I know kind of the ins and outs of it. So yeah, and definitely major caveats there for sure because AI at baseline is also going to agree with you. So if you put something in, it's highly likely to agree with you and back you up, and which is kind of scary. If you tell it to be skeptical, then it'll be skeptical. So it's like it's not always going to give the same answer. If two people put the same question in, it won't necessarily give the same answer based on your settings and a lot of other factors. So, I mean, so many layers to the fact that you don't want to just be plugging something into AI and getting a detox protocol. I mean, yeah, definitely a great tool in general, but you really have to know how to use it. And I absolutely would advise anyone listening to work with a practitioner who understands this stuff because things can really backfire. I mean, I've definitely had a lot of clients come to me with like, "Oh, well, AI told me to do this," and they're super smart people. They're using AI like in their businesses and stuff. And like, well, I can just use AI for this too. Great, easy, done, right? And then they buy the supplements, no questions asked, and then they started, and then they don't feel better or they feel worse. You know, can work, but it's kind of a toss up.
Yeah, right. So you mentioned early on kind of about the nervous system, right? And that's such a critical piece of healing. And so even I'm assuming you find that even when the symptoms seem more directly physical, I mean the nervous system, there is a physical aspect, but do you find that that's a really big issue for you dealing with the nervous system?
I do. And so the nervous system determines whether the body's in a state whether it can actually heal or if you're stuck in fight or flight, wired but tired state. If you're in a chronic stress response state, then it will actually block things like healthy digestion, your detox pathways, even your immune system can get compromised and you can get sick more frequently. So, if you're doing a lot of great things and you're seeing no effects and no improvement, the nervous system is one of the first places to look because there's actually multiple states of the vagus nerve, which is that cranial nerve, as you know, but just for listeners, the cranial nerve that runs from the base of the brain all the way down to the gut and innervates a lot of things in between. It can be in a parasympathetic state, which is your rest and digest state, or it can be in a fight or flight state. So I use a lot of vagus nerve exercises and breathing exercises. These are science backed. Some vagus nerve and breathing exercises, have more data than others because it's like one of those realms where it's, harder to study. And one reason why people say, oh, that's just, I can kind of skip that part. It's not not really mandatory for healing, but a lot of times it actually is. And to flip the script on that, it's great, I think, because a lot of times it's free, right? And you can do it, wherever you are and it's fast, and I just tell people to make that part of your routine kind of like, okay, well, you take your supplements, you do your nervous system exercise, and it just kind of like it's part of the routine.
Yeah, and with a lot of the vagus nerve exercises, you look at, ancient healing practices, Egyptians, Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, and they had all that stuff built in. It was just kinda, "Here, do these breathing exercises and do them at this count, at, this time of day," etcetera. So, things like that don't stick around if there isn't value, right? People just discard them. There've been so many ideas that people have tried, and only a few of them have stuck. But now, like you said, there's good science behind it, so that's wonderful. So, you were emphasizing that healing has to happen in the right order. What does that really look like, and what happens when people get it backwards?
Yeah. So as we were discussing, we have to stabilize the system first. So if someone's been, taking a ton of supplements or been in a really toxic environment, then we have to remove the exposures that are causing them to be sick, support the nervous system, and make sure that we have the detox pathways or drainage pathways, whatever term you want to use. Basically, you're having good bowel movements, there's no lymphatic backup or things like that, bile flow issues, things like that. Because a lot of times, if people say, okay, I want to take a detox protocol. So, the first thing that might be thought of or come up on a search for that would be binders. And if you start with binders, a lot of times it can backfire because they can make you constipated. They can deplete your neurotransmitters and your nutrients. And so then, I find people just feel like drained, right? If you start with binders and you're not using them properly. So a lot of times people will assume that, they're too sensitive or like they can't handle these supplements or they're just, not going to feel better. But really, it's just wasn't done in the right order because I can't emphasize enough that we can't out supplement our way out of a dysregulated nervous system or out of a toxic environment.
Gotcha. It's often I find it now people are looking for you, but I find with patients that come in to see me, often it's difficult to convince them that it might be a mold problem. I'm thinking of one very bright woman, and she came to see us, brought her 2 sons in who were having ADHD type symptoms, and we treated her, and it wasn't we weren't getting much success, and I said, I think you should do a mold test." "Well, I can't have any mold exposure." I said, "Well, let's just do a urine test and see." Sure enough, boy, it was a mess, and we said, This is probably from your house." Well, we had our house remodeled, X number of years ago. I said, "I recommend you get a mold inspector." And he went under the house and he said, "You have a lake under there. You have a broken pipe that's probably been draining sewage under your house for 5 to 10 years, and it's just filled with mold." And so she was shocked, right? And they did good mold remediation, and then everybody started getting much better. The 2 boys are off in college now, and she's doing great, but she just didn't wanna hear it, right? It's like, "I can't be mold."
Absolutely. Yeah, it has a stigma surrounding it. Like, oh, mold is in, really old homes or like dirty homes and, or like people who just don't take care of their houses or things like that. But I mean, really, we see stories about this every week almost celebrities dealing with mold. Multi-million dollar homes, brand new homes. I mean, lumber is oftentimes just like preloaded with it. I mean, there is mold, it can be anywhere. And it's just a matter of how much mold is there, what type of mold is it, and how sensitive are you to mold. So those are kind of like the variable sliders. But if you it does not discriminate for sure.
I first got turned on to mold many decades ago. I was a general contractor, and I can't tell you how many times I would tear off the stucco underneath an old wooden window from the '30s, and it was just nothing but mold holding the house up practically. And, it was very difficult to get people to realize, This is really a problem. One of my staff is very, very sensitive to mold, ended up being hospitalized for something that the mold triggered, and moved into a house, not a nice house, and started having mold symptoms again. So she got the nose patrol. Nose patrol, she had Bagel the Beagle come out, and he sniffs for mold, and boy, he just lit up at several places in the house, and then she got a mold inspector, and sure enough, they found a fair amount of mold, which you would never know because the house looks like it's very well maintained, right? And
Yep.
so it can be tricky.
Yeah, it is hidden so many times, and those mold dogs can be really useful
Yeah,
for sure as part of the team.
I just thought it was great. Bagel the Beagle. So, can you
That's cute.
take us through any case you want, where someone came in and was really stuck, and then what shifted when you changed the approach?
So, I love sharing about my one client who was in her lower 30s, like, healthy lady. So she, has her own or had her own business, still does, and she came to me because she had been experiencing about 2 years of worsening fatigue such that she was trying to take care of her 2 young kids, but she really couldn't even take care of her kids or do her business, do her work anymore, at the time because it was just too much, sort of debilitating fatigue and then brain fog as well, just feeling like she wasn't functioning. And she had done some research, so she started some supplements and she was starting to react to pretty much everything she took in sort of random ways. Like she would get rashes or she would get gut symptoms or she would get worsening symptoms. And so she came to see me and in talking to her, I quickly realized that she was in fight or flight. Her nervous system was just traumatized from this whole experience. And she had researched mold, and it turns out that she had been exposed to mold at her, I think it was her work and her home, actually, in this case, but sometimes it can be really anywhere. But in this case, the first thing that we had to do was address the nervous system. So, because it was really blocking all the things she was trying to do and then causing issues with the mast cells too. So, calming nervous system, calming mast cells. So, doing that stabilization phase was what she had been missing and removing any ongoing exposure. With her, it was we had, like, a deadline because she was gonna be a bridesmaid in a wedding, or she wanted to, and she was gonna have to fly and travel and, function for a whole weekend and all of these things, and so that was the goal. So at first, it was a bit, like, "Are we gonna make it? Is she gonna be able to do it?" But then once, she messaged me one day, I still remember this. She's like, "I felt a shift in my body." She finally felt like she relaxed for the first time in a really long time, and I knew then that once her nervous system kinda shifted, that things were gonna start to work better. And they did. So she was able to go. She was able to be a bridesmaid in this wedding and she was able to travel, which travel, is definitely difficult a lot of times for people who are sensitive to mold and who are sick and who are, so many things. It's usually the last thing to come back. So it was a huge victory and she's doing so well now, but I feel like it's just taking over people's lives, right? Like this fatigue and these other symptoms because a lot of times, like you say, are very like a lot of people don't understand that it could be the environment and it can be nervous system when it's like, oh, well, you look fine. Like a lot of people look fine maybe on the outside, but then they're really not. So I just love helping people get their lives back and get, these healthy years back so they can actually, take care of their families and things like that and actually do their jobs.
That's a wonderful story, thank you. In Chinese medicine, I remember when I was back in school and there were a few illnesses that would cause what they termed spirit possession disorder. and everybody thought it was shamanic, or something, right? And then I remember the first time a patient sitting across from me, she said, "Thank you so much. I've got my spirit back." And it was like, "Oh, that's what they mean." They finally got back into themselves, right? And so it wasn't, I mean, who knows what they meant 2,000 years ago, but, uh, people do say, "Thank you. I got my spirit back." That's awesome. And I
Yeah.
was thinking about, you were talking about different exposures. I actually had a family member who kept getting ill, just everything seemed like it should be okay, but finally suspected some mold. She had a fairly new car, it was a couple years old, but when they took off the liner, the entire car was full of mold. She had a leak. She had a roof rack, and it was leaking around the roof rack, and we found out when she took it in that that was very common for that model, and so replaced everything. About a week later, she went out, got in, and there was a little puddle of water on the floor. She took the car in and traded it in, and she had
Yeah. No, I
PTSD around
totally
it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I had a client once and he's, a really athletic guy and he was getting so frustrated because he had ruled out like almost everything else. His home was fine and it turned out to be his car. And once he got rid of that car, he started feeling better and he was able to go back to his getting his gains at the gym and everything else, but it's like it's the car that he did not want to get rid of.
Yeah. Well, and that's,
Sometimes
I
we have
appreciate
to.
that you're doing the testing for it, right? So that you can show people you have an exposure somewhere. We just have
Yeah.
to track it down.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening and they're starting to wonder if they fall into one of these categories, something deeper going on, what would you suggest as a first simple step?
Yeah, so I would take a little inventory of sort of your environmental history. Do you feel worse in certain spaces? Have your symptoms started or been persistent since you moved to a certain place or since you started working somewhere, or since you got a certain car or since there was some kind of leak or water damage? And then just start to kind of connect those dots in your head. But also, I do have a lot of free resources for people on that, on my social media and things like that. As far as like a mold symptoms quiz, I have one of those that people can just go through. It's a 2-minute online quiz. And because mold can do pretty much anything, but there are some symptoms that are more common than others. Like we talked about the brain fog and fatigue, and there's some others, but kind of can give you an idea whether, yeah, you should probably check for environmental factors or maybe it's something else.
And so the going back to the title of our talk, you're not broken, you're overloaded. And, that's often part of the battle is getting them to not give up. And so, what would you want people to basically understand about their body and about the ability to heal?
Absolutely. So that your body's not broken, it's overwhelmed, it's overloaded with toxins, and your body keeps the score on this. So when we start removing what's burdening the body and support it in a way that's aligned with how it's supposed to heal, things can shift. Healing is possible. I am ever the optimist and, definitely always a cheerleader for people because it's so powerful what these interventions can do whenever we figure out the root causes.
Dr. Diana Stafford, I want to thank you immensely. I really hope people tune into this because we're talking about, well, we started doing a new test on people. And so we got an interview with a specialist from the company. And we said, well, could this item be from mold exposure? And the person said, well, where do you live? I said, in San Francisco Bay. And she just started laughing. She said, are you kidding? Of course it's mold exposure, right? So again, it can be quite ubiquitous. And certainly we see a lot of symptoms of these things. So I know you've got to get off and see a patient. So I just want to thank you very, very much. I've really learned from you, and I certainly appreciate your coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Dr. John.
Okay, you take care.
You too.
Thank you for joining me on The Balancing Point. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave a review. Feeling out of balance? Most approaches just manage symptoms. Here, we get to the root. So real healing, real clarity, and balance can begin. Visit AlamedaAcupuncture.com. That's AlamedaAcupuncture.com to learn more, explore our supplements, or book a call. We'd love to hear from you.